We've been doing this series on how to meet new friends and make new friends when we move to a new area. And hopefully it's been helpful. Hopefully it's giving you some ideas, kind of sparking some things and reprioritizing us. Like, this is as much a reminder for myself as anyone. I'm moving in 2 weeks and I'm like, okay, what's most important? So lots and lots of tips in all of those previous videos, but today I'm going to talk about the 3 biggest mistakes that I've seen, because sometimes we learn from failure more than we learn from tips. And so I've actually had a lot of friends move in the last couple of years, and I've been listening to their horror stories. It's like dating stories. They call me and they're just like, you would not believe what this woman did when I met her. And I'm hearing all the different stories of what it's like to be out there making friends. And so I wanted to share with you some of the most common complaints I hear so that we don't make that same mistake. We don't want to make that same mistake. So the first biggest mistake that I keep hearing about is that we overtalk or we overshare. This one comes up a lot. So over talking is not the same as oversharing. Sometimes we can talk a lot and not share very much, but I'm going to group them together for purposes today. So the number one thing that leaves people feeling awful is when they leave our presence and they don't feel like we acted interested in them, when we took all the airtime, when we talked over them, when we just kind of didn't be curious about their lives and leave space and time for them. So we might be talking too much because we're nervous. We might be talking too much because we're extroverts and we process out loud, and so we think everything we're thinking needs to be expressed. We might be talking too much because we think we're really entertaining and we think we're breaking the ice. We might have all kinds of stories about why we're talking too much, but it's not okay. It's not okay. So we need to really be mindful about making sure the person who leaves us feels seen and valued and heard. We sometimes talk because we think we need to feel understood. And so we're showing up needing this person to know us and our story and what matters to us. And we are trying to feel seen and heard. But the other person will not want to repeat that experience and will not feel close to us unless we see them and hear them and understand them. And so right off the bat, we need to show up and think about, if we're meeting somebody for lunch, we need to think about that lunch as at least 50-50 talking time. Maybe even 60-40 toward them, like we give them more space and time. Maybe we show up and we know that we have a tendency to talk, so we just say, you know what, for the first half, I'm gonna just keep the focus on her. And because otherwise I could be at risk of running over the whole thing. Or we talk about something and then we immediately use that to ask a question. And then we have to be quiet and give them time to answer that question. And then we can't share the very next thing that comes up in our mind. We have to kind of hold it back. This isn't about not being a talkative person. We have talkative people. I would give the opposite advice to somebody who's not opening up, right? They need to practice opening up. These are muscles that we can practice. But I'm hearing way more complaints about people over talking than under sharing. So it's just an important muscle too, that listening and being quiet are muscles we have to develop. People will not feel close to us if they don't get a chance to talk, if they don't feel affirmed, if they don't feel like we're really interested, if they don't feel like we're listening. And so, so much more could be said about that. But if you have a tendency to talk, then we need to show up and immediately use that to kind of help break the ice if it's a helpful skill, and then immediately go into listening mode and curiosity mode and affirming mode and listening mode, and doing everything we can to communicate to that person that we see them, that we like them, that we understand them. For whatever the purpose and the context that we have, that's what we're trying to communicate. So yeah, and even the oversharing piece, you guys, it's not even just talking so much. Let me talk a little bit, let's just call this the second big mistake. I'm just gonna divvy these up, because it's one thing to talk too much. It's another thing that even if you talk for a tiny bit, but if you share too much, it can really, you have to be really, really careful. It's not about not being authentic. It's about oversharing for the purpose of meeting a new person. So we want to be mindful that we remember that anybody we're meeting is a new person in our lives. We don't know them. They are not our therapist. They're not our counselor. They are not our best friend to process life with. They're not even somebody we need to confess anything to. We don't need to be bringing up our biggest trauma. We don't need to be bringing up our whole life story. And so part of it is just being mindful that really vulnerability is incremental. And if you struggle with this, then the coaching circle is so important. That was such an important thing because we do a whole class on vulnerability and how it's got to be done safely and in ways that feel good. For those of us who need to learn how to share more or share less, we need to learn how to be vulnerable in small little doses. We practice just saying a little bit. So we can say, I'm going through a divorce. We can say, I lost my job. We can say something hard, but then we don't talk a lot about it. We say it. We say, I'm going through my divorce. My kids are in a hard space right now. Like, we can say something. It's not about trying to hide who we are, but we say a little bit and then we move on quickly. These are new people in our lives. They don't need details. They don't need to hear the drama. They don't need all the emotions. We can just say, I moved here because I went through a big divorce. It was, we can be authentic and be like, and then we say, but I'm really glad to have landed here and I'm looking forward to meeting people. And we show respect to the other person, that we have boundaries. This is really important. And becomes increasingly important as so many of us are lonely. It makes us a little bit more, I don't want to use the word like desperate, but because we don't have close people in our lives, we have a lot bottled up sometimes. A lot of us, like the first kind person, we're just like, and we can be at risk of oversharing. But we have to remind ourselves that just because we don't have a lot of best friends in our lives right now doesn't make this new friend we're meeting suddenly need to fill that role for everybody, right? So we want to show them that we have boundaries, that we know what's appropriate, not oversharing or being too heavy or processing a lot or giving too many details. And so practice what it looks like to just be authentic, say a few sentences, move on, change the subject. And then when you guys get together again, you can always share a few more details. But this isn't about vomiting our life story on somebody too quickly at the beginning. So biggest mistake number 1, just taking too much airtime, talking too much. Biggest mistake number 2, being too vulnerable for the fact that you're new friends. So be cognizant of that. Let's go with mistake number 3. It's when we show up and we're trying to impress people instead of connect with them. Sometimes we show up and we feel like we have to get all perfect. We feel like we have to represent really well. Our house has to be perfect. You name it. We feel like we have to wait until we look good. And then we show up and we think we have to be really interesting. It's like we don't have to. People aren't getting together with you because they're like, I hope she impresses me. I hope I'm intimidated by her. People aren't getting together for lunch just being like, I just want to be wowed by how perfect she is. We don't want that when we're with people. We like people who are kind of, a little self-deprecating maybe. They're not perfect. They don't take themselves too seriously. And yet sometimes we show up and feel like we just have to be like so perfect. We don't. People like imperfection. We don't have to, we don't have to be mean about ourselves or anything like that, but we can show up and realize that this time together is for 2 people to get to know each other. It's about relating to each other, connecting. It's not about needing to impress them. I used to mess up on this all the time. I used to have people over and I would feel like everything needed to be perfect and the napkins need to match and the meal needs to be perfect. And I realized that I was focusing so much on the impressing people that people would come to my house and then they would feel like one of my friends said once, I feel like I can never invite you back over to my house because my house is so messy all the time. And I realized, wow, here I've impressed her, but I've also intimidated her. And now we're gonna have a problem connecting and relating because I've set the bar too high. We don't need to do that. In fact, when you move, I'm telling this to myself now because it's going to take a long while for me to get furniture in my house. We don't need to wait until our house is put together before we have people over. We can say to people, we still have boxes everywhere. Come on over. We can still say, I haven't even bought furniture for that room, but I can't wait to meet you. Bring your family over. We don't have to be wow. We don't have to be done. We don't have to be complete. We don't have to be finished. All the art doesn't have to be hung. That's true for our homes. It's true for our lives. So people aren't waiting because they want to meet the perfect person. They want to be liked. They want to be connected with. They want to be heard. They want to be listened. So take the attention off of how we present and instead put it on how we can help them feel more confident and comfortable and connected. And then the 4th mistake, the 4th biggest mistake that I see so often is yeah, is if we don't have consistency. And I brought that up a lot at the beginning of this series, but it's a really big mistake if we see people we like and we aren't following up with them, if we're not scheduling another get together, if we have them over for dinner and we really had a good time, and now if we're waiting for them to invite us over for dinner, the friendship could just die. Invite them over again. It doesn't have to be back and forth. It's not their turn. It's simply, if you felt like it was a fun time and you enjoyed yourself, do it again. Just keep putting the invitation out there. We're doing it as for our benefit. We want friends. We want good friends. And we know that it's impossible to build a friendship without having some consistent interaction. So let's give that gift to the people we're meeting that we want to go deeper and closer with. So hopefully those help. Make sure that we, all of us, myself included, are showing up and making friendships in the way that matters most. I hope my books are valuable. Hopefully all the other things, I just want to keep teaching. And I'm like, the time is up. I must stop. But yeah, the coaching circle, the books, there's so many other videos here on YouTube. Hopefully you'll find more helpful resources for going deeper. And hopefully this series has been helpful for at least getting us a little bit more inspired and a little bit more clear about what really matters. I wish you the very, very best. Truly. I wish you the best as you make new friends. It's hard when we move. Just be super gentle with yourself. Have extra compassion. It brings up a lot of our insecurities and losses and fears. And lean into building relationships. I want them for you. May they happen.